Um, like Tommy said, my name is Mick. This is my wife, Janet. She and I operate Southern Breezes Real Estate here in Charleston. We also have a note investment business called KTI Financial. We're here. And what that was born from was back in 2012. Does everybody remember the situation where there was like a flood of REO properties? There was a lot of HUDs and Fannies and all bank-owned stuff, and there was a lot of stuff out there on the market that had been foreclosed on, and it was just way too many properties out there, okay? We were representing a pretty decent amount of them, and what happened with that was Jen and I decided that we would like to get into the real estate investment arena, okay? But the problem is, we couldn't buy any of the properties that we represented. It was in our listing agreement, we couldn't buy them. So we were kind of scratching our head, and one day Janet was in her office and she said, "You have got to come see this. I think this is the answer to what we're looking for." And I walked in and it was this guy talking about notes. And I didn't know what a note was. Okay? And this is going to be a pretty good segue from Josh's presentation here today, because what we're talking about is actually part of a home loan or any other type of loan that you buy, okay? So, note investing came about, oh my goodness gracious, years and years and years ago, and the person that we've been learning from saw a spot in the marketplace where it was going to be a tremendous opportunity for people who took advantage of it, okay? There was going to be a lot of growth, and he started back in 1983. His name is Eddie Speed. And he's out of Dallas, Texas. And if anybody's familiar with Eddie Speed, he's quite the character, but you can never judge a book by its cover. He looks and sounds like a character, but he is the absolute biggest genius I've ever seen when it comes to looking at a deal and being able to look at the financing and do it 20 different ways in his head in 10 seconds. It doesn't, it's like he can come up with an idea that you would never think of. But anyways, he started an operation called Note School, and that was designed to teach people about note investing, the ups, downs, all the things that you really need to know, because there are a lot of moving parts, okay? Today's presentation is just going to be a very basic introduction to this and what you can do with just a little bit of effort, okay? This is pretty much what our investment life has looked like, okay? We've done some fix and flips and things like that. Well, coming up to the very top, we've finished a fix and flip, we've turned around and sold it, and hey, that's wonderful, but now we've got a problem. We've got some dry cash sitting here doing absolutely nothing, okay? And as long as that's sitting there doing nothing, it's also diluting the returns that you already just made. So if you had if your money's out for working for 6 months and it's not working for 6 months, you're not making the full amount of return that you possibly can, okay? So Janet found this. We decided to dive in, take a look at this, and really dissect it and make it our own. And that's what we've done, okay? I guess the best thing to do is to start off by explaining what we mean by note investing, okay? What is a note? Well, everybody here deals with notes on a daily basis, I'm sure, okay? Whether it be cash, checks, things like that. A note is basically an IOU. It's something that you sign and that you promise to pay. It can be a dollar bill, it can be a check. How about buying a car? When you buy a car, you use a loan, typically, okay? And when you pay that, when you sign on the dotted line, you're signing a note saying that you promise to pay on a monthly basis, whatever it is, okay? But what we're going to talk about today is the mortgage loan, the note that's involved with a home loan or a mortgage, okay? And this is basically what one looks like. It's pretty simple, okay? For the sake of making it simple, okay, most people in the state of South Carolina use a note and mortgage when they close on a loan for a home. Is that correct? That's probably the most common, okay? So what I'm trying to get at is there's two different documents that are primary to this loan, okay? Like if you were to sit and close a loan with Josh at a closing table, buying a house, the two most important documents that you're going to sign at that closing table, one is the promissory note, and that's saying, hey, I owe you a certain amount of money, and I'm going to make that payment every single month. This is how much I'm going to pay. This is how much the interest rate is. This is for how long, and this is when it starts. Okay? That's what a note is all about. It spells out all the terms and conditions of the IOU. The next document is going to be the mortgage. Okay? That mortgage is a pledge of that property that you are buying against that note. And it says, if I don't pay that note as I agree, this document right here, the security instrument or mortgage, spells out what you as the lender can do upon a default. In other words, the borrower doesn't pay. So that security instrument spells out exactly what you can do. You can foreclose if you need to, okay? There's all sorts of different ways that you can do these things, okay? And we're just going to cover some of the basics. All right? So a simple transaction, this is how it generally works, okay? A simplified transaction, let's say we have a purchase price of a property for $110,000. The buyer comes up with a $5,000 payment, a down payment, okay? So he's got some skin in the game. He's approved for a loan from a lender for $105,000, okay? That's what the lender brings to this deal. The seller has ownership of the property. That's what he brings to this deal, okay? So the buyer's funds and the loan are given to an attorney. This is a real simplified version of it, but those funds are given to the attorney to hold until closing, all right? Sitting at the table, the seller will sign a deed transferring ownership of that property from himself to the buyer, okay? Now, in order to pay for that, they will take the lender's proceeds and the buyer's proceeds that have been put together, and they'll give the seller that money. The buyer signs the deed over. He says, okay, I've got my money. Here's your document. Here's your property. Here's the deed to your property. I'm out. Okay? So now the seller has transferred ownership and he's gone. So what's left? We have a buyer who signs a promissory note to the lender and a mortgage, pledging the property against that note. Okay? So the seller has his money, he's gone. The lender has a note, an IOU, a promise to pay, and a mortgage saying, hey, if I don't, this is what you can do to me. Okay? The buyer has what? He ends up with the deed and the obligation to pay that note. Okay? So that's basically it. Typically, our notes that you and I probably sign for, the most common is a 360-month, which is a 30-year note, at some type of interest rate, whether it be fixed or whether it be variable. Okay, that all depends on your lender. Okay, what type of loan that you're going to get. All right. So once the bank has these notes, they create these loans. Okay, as Josh was saying earlier. Is this thing too loud? Alright, I feel like I'm screaming at you. Alright, so what happens is the bank bundles all these loans together that they have, and like he was saying, they sell them on the secondary market. Okay? They sell these to large organizations like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Okay, those operations, those government entities, sponsored entities, okay, they're out there designed to recapitalize lenders. Okay? Because once a lender runs out of money, they can't loan anymore, right? So they have to turn around, take those notes that they've created, sell them on the secondary market to get another influx of cash so they can do it again. That's the primary source of how the money comes into play with the lenders. Okay? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they have rigorous guidelines as well. So they look at this big pool of notes and loans and they say, hey, you know what? There's a percentage of these loans that we don't like. They don't fall within our guidelines. We're not saying they're bad loans, but they just don't fall within our guidelines. So we're going to cut them off. We're going to create a smaller pool, and we're going to sell them to somebody else. All right? When that happens, some of these big hedge funds like Black Knight, some of them BSI, there are other large hedge funds out there, who will buy these notes in pools. Once they buy these notes in pools, they're exactly like Freddie and Fannie. They'll look at this whole pool, they say, okay, we bought all these, but these are the only ones that work for us. We're going to carve off the ones that we don't want, and we're going to sell them to somebody else. Okay? So, once they get done doing that, it rolls down, so on and so on and so on, and then finally we end up with somebody who owns maybe 50, 60, 70 loans, and they're willing to sell them to us one at a time. We don't have to buy them in a pool. Okay? So we can buy them one at a time, two at a time, three at a time, whatever it is that we want to do. Alright? So these loans are available to us. Alright? So we do our due diligence on these properties. We can buy these notes. And no, you don't have to have a license to do this. You just have to have the knowledge. Okay? Because, like I said earlier, there's a lot of moving parts to these things. And you certainly don't want to walk in this and learn by making mistakes, because these mistakes can be extremely costly. Okay? But you don't have to have a license. There's no big regulation. Alright? The only thing that you want to avoid is securities laws. You don't want to, and we'll talk to an attorney about that stuff at another time, but this does not fall within the securities. So you don't have to worry about it. Okay? You can buy these as an LLC or in your IRA. That's what Janet and I try to focus on, is helping people with IRAs and what we call dry cash. People with, if you have an IRA and it's sitting there without an investment, you're doing nothing with it. Okay? What's it earning?
Nothing.
Zero, exactly. Okay? So what's the return on a bank savings account? Not much. It's what, 0.001, 0.002 maybe? It's a very, very minuscule amount. Okay? Even CDs. CDs are what, 2.5% at this point? But you have to tie up your money for a specific period of time. It might be 2 years, might be 4 years, might be 5 years. Okay? And that's for a 2.5% return. Okay? We can show you how to triple that return without any difficulty. Okay? And what we do is we create passive income. Very passive. Okay? Now, I put this on here just so that there's a financial calculator. Okay? And people freak out when I say financial calculators. Okay? That's pretty much the way I looked when somebody said you need to get a financial calculator. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? I have no idea how to. There's too many buttons. Way too many buttons. Well, if you're going to do any type of financial calculations, this little calculator right here, it's called a 10BII. Okay? It's an app you can get for your phone. Very inexpensive. And once you know how to use this thing, and you're only going to use 4 keys on this thing, so don't let the rest of them intimidate you. Alright? The whole idea is if you have 3 parameters of your note, you can solve for the 4th. Okay? Like if I know how many months, how much I'm borrowing, and what the interest rate is, I can solve for the payment. All right? Making the same calculations, if I want to find out how much interest I'm earning, I'll put the payment I'm receiving for how many months and how much I paid for it. And then I can solve for how much interest I'm earning. So it's an extremely versatile piece of equipment, okay? If you know 3, you can solve for the 4th. Somebody says I can afford $500 a month. I'd like to borrow this much money. How many months is it going to take me? You know what the interest rate is, you can solve for the amount of months. So when you're doing owner financing in your real estate investment business, okay, having this tool sitting at a kitchen table, you can create the loans that you want to create. If you want to owner finance somebody, a house to somebody, they give you a down payment, and you tell them, hey, the remaining balance is $87,000. Well, I can afford, $641 a month. Fine. You can figure out how many months it'll take them to pay it off. Okay? So this is an amazing tool. Just amazing. It is probably the biggest eye-opener I ever saw. Okay? So that's pretty much it. That's an HP 12C. That was made by Hewlett Packard. Okay? This is one of the most typical ones. But again, all we're using is these top 4 keys right here. That's it. Very simple, very easy. Okay? N is the number of the months. I is the interest rate. PV means present value, which is typically the amount of money that either you've got invested or you're paying. Right? And the PMT just stands for payment. That's it. It's simple. And if anybody ever wants a lesson on this, wants to stop by our office, bring a cup of coffee, come on in, I'll show you how it works. And it's really not as difficult as you might think. Okay? It just looks intimidating. It's not. Okay? So, what are we actually investing in? One of the hardest things that I had to get through my head when we started doing this was we're not buying the properties. What we're investing in is the payment stream. Okay? The payment stream. That's the 360 payments going forward that borrower is going to be paying. That's what you're investing in. Okay? A million different things can happen with that payment stream. It can pay off early. That's always a big plus. Okay? There's a million different things that can go on with it. And what we do is we analyze each loan and look at it and make sure that we're buying it with the worst case scenario in mind. So if the worst thing happens, we're still good. Yes, sir?
Why is it a plus if it pays off early? Just so you get your capital back?
Yeah.
Okay, so you get the tip, but you're not...
You're getting the unpaid balance back.
Yeah, but you're not making as much in the interest, or...
Oh no, you're making that much interest every month.
Every month?
Every month that you're holding that loan.
Yeah.
Okay? You're making your 10%.
Yeah.
Okay? Based on your investment that you still have in the deal. Okay? It's an amortization schedule. Does everybody do you know what an amortization schedule is on a loan like this? Each payment, it's a drawn out number. Like payment number 1 has this much, if you make the payment, okay, it's this much interest, this much of the principal's coming back, and then this is how much, there's 3 different things on there. The last item is the unpaid balance, okay? So the interest goes in your pocket as earned interest income. The very small number is the small return of principal, okay? Which gets a little bit bigger as it goes down. Okay? So if it pays off early, you've still got the vast majority.
You get the bulk of the interest.
You get the bulk of that amount that he borrowed. He still owes darn near the same amount.
You bought the note at a discount.
That's correct.
That's why.
Yes. So if you buy the note at a discount, you're exactly right. Okay? So when you buy a note at discount, they still owe. If they borrowed $100,000, okay, we bought it for 90. All right. They pay off in 12 months, they still owe like $98,700 or whatever. They owe us $98,700.
So you make the discount amount, and you make the interest.
Exactly.
So.
Interest is the time that you own it,
Most of the interest is at the beginning.
and the interest.
3 or 5 years.
And the earned discount, that's correct. Okay? And that can be, 1 year, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. Okay? It all depends. So, we are actually looking at the payment stream. With that payment stream, we don't own the property. We don't want the property. Okay? We have no repairs. We have no tenants. No vacancies. No midnight calls because the toilet stopped up. None of that stuff. Okay? Just think about it. When people have their own home and they're making monthly mortgage payments to the bank, when something goes wrong, do they call the bank? No. They handle it themselves. The bank is who has the money coming in every month, and that's what we're doing, is we're creating what I like to call email box money. I used to call it mailbox money because it used to come as a check. Now all we do is get a kind of a little notification in our email that says, hey, we just made a deposit into your account for this much money or this loan. It's as simple as that. And this is as passive as you ever want to get. Yes?
Did you ever get any one of your properties foreclosed?
Yep. Yep.
What's the process? How long it takes?
It depends on the state. Okay? Without getting, this is one of the moving parts that I was talking about. That's a very good question. Okay? There are some states, like Georgia, which is a non-judicial state. Okay? And I'll explain that to you real quick. There are two different types of states in the country. Right? There's judicial procedures and non-judicial procedures for foreclosure. Okay? Judicial is when you have to take it in front of a judge, plead your case, put all your documentation in front of him, and prove it, and he says, yep, you got a complaint. So he files a judgment. Then it moves on, and it gets sent to the master in equity, at least around here. I'm using terminology for here, okay? Once it goes to the master in equity, it gets scheduled for a sale. It goes to the sale at the county, and the judge puts it up for sale at the county courthouse, right? This is where all of us have bought properties, at the foreclosure sale. Okay? Now that's a judicial process. That's where it's gone through the judicial system, the judges, everything's gone that way. Okay? Georgia is a non-judicial state. When they sign a deed of trust in Georgia, there is a power of sale clause in their document. It basically says, hey, if I don't make the payment, you as the lender can go ahead and take that property to the county courthouse, sell it right out from underneath me. 90 days. Very fast process in Georgia. You can do that within 90 days. Typically, I think South Carolina, we're looking at what, 6-month period, roughly, for a full process of judicial foreclosure? What do you think, MJ? Okay, 6 to 9 months? Okay, possibly a year. Okay, so that's another thing that you want to consider when you're looking at notes. What state's it in? What kind of document did they use? Is there a power of sale clause in that document that allows you to kind of skirt around the judicial system and do something at the courthouse yourself? Okay? How many of you have ever bought a property on land contract? That's how we got started. That's how Jen and I got started. Years ago. We actually had owners of a property say, yes, we'll owner finance it to you on a land contract. You don't get the deed until you pay off the loan. Just basically an installment loan. Okay? There are people buying these properties. Tommy, there's a lot of land contracts going on around here, right? Okay? So now if you have a land contract, do you think we have to go through a judicial process? Not usually. You can cancel that land contract as long as it's between the buyer and the seller and you both agree and there's a document saying, hey, we're going to cancel this. Cancel land contract, you don't have to go through foreclosure, you don't have to go through all that malarkey. Very inexpensive, easy, fast. Turn around, sell that property again. Okay? There's advantages and disadvantages to each type of loan. Land contracts are easy. They can be, you transfer title very quickly. If you need to cancel the contract, you can do that very quickly. But it's not worth as much as a note and mortgage. Okay? If you're looking to sell that note and mortgage, that's going to be more valuable on the secondary market because everything's spelled out. And it's a traditional note and mortgage. Okay? So that's what we do. We create email box money. Alright? So just a real basic idea. Alright? We have an existing loan of $100,000. Interest rate is at 6%. Term is 360 months, which is a 30-year period, which is very, very common. Alright? Payment of principal and interest only, and that's what we buy. Principal and interest only payments. Taxes and insurance will usually be escrowed by the buyer, by the lender. Okay? The buyer will send in that extra amount to be put aside so that when the taxes and the insurance come due, the bank pays them. Alright? So we don't get access to that. That much money, that small amount of money that gets set aside for taxes and insurance is not credited to us. It's held by the lender.
So the lender still services the loan?
Ah, that's a good question. I will get to that in one moment. Good idea. No. No. Okay? We use a servicer. Good, very good question. Yeah, I don't want to leave you hanging. But yes, we use our own servicer. Okay? So that loan gets transferred from a servicer from the original lender to the new one. Unless we want to leave it there. We can. Okay? That's a great question though. Okay? Now, is everybody familiar with what a servicer is? A servicer is a company who takes all the burden off the lender, like us. Okay? They receive the payments, they account for the payments, they make sure that it gets credited for what has to be credited. Okay? They'll send statements to the borrower every month. They'll keep everything in compliance. They'll keep everything off our back, and then they'll send us the money every month. And for this, they charge a very small fee. Usually, our servicer charges $18.50 a month. Very inexpensive. Best money you'd ever spend next to buying a 10BII calculator. Okay? So, yeah, the servicers are wonderful. They're our friends. They're our saviors. I love them because we don't have to deal with calling the borrower. We don't have to deal with it. They make collection calls, they'll send notices, they'll send late payment, everything that you want done, they'll do it. Takes it right off your plate. Okay? Allied Servicing is probably one of the greatest ones out there. They're in Spokane, Washington. They're our buddies. Okay? So let's say that we have a $100,000 note, 6% interest rate, 30 years, payment's $599.55. Okay? If everybody wants to run a calculator, you can go ahead and double check it. Okay? If you were to pay $100,000 for this loan, okay, then you would be earning that 6%. Is that correct? All right. Well, let's say you could buy that discounted note at $85,000. You could pay $85,000 for that note. Okay. Now you've just leveraged that. You're still receiving the $599.55. But based on what you paid for it, now you're making a 7.59% yield. That's how you can leverage. Okay? An existing loan isn't only worth its face value. It's what you can do to leverage. So if you buy it at a discount, you can increase the yield. Okay? Now here's another item. Let's say you've got somebody out there who says, hey, this is a great idea. I got about 100 grand sitting in my IRA. I would really like to make 7.5%. Say, well, I can give you about 7%. How does that work for you? Well, yeah, okay. I'll sell that to you for 90 grand. You bought it for 85, you just sold it for 90, gave somebody a very good deal for the 7% return in their IRA, tax-free, as long as it's within a Roth, of course. Okay? You just flipped your first note. You just made $5,000 on your first note. Yes, sir?
If they make that payoff, would that would also go into your Roth?
Yep. Yep. If they buy it within their Roth IRA, it's a self-directed IRA, okay, you can use that as a Roth. Those gains are tax-free as long as you take them out after 59 and a half. Okay? I'm not an IRA custodian, but please, by all means, if you have any questions about IRA accounts and things like that, please talk to an IRA administrator like Quest or Equity Trust. Fantastic people. Yeah.
So is it the risk profile of each individual loan that determines the discount that you're able to buy at?
Yes. Good question. Okay. Yeah, what we do is we look at a note, and there's several different qualities of a note that will determine its value. Okay. There's 6 or 7 of them. All right. One is the quality of the paper. All right. How it's written. Like I was saying before, a land contract is not as valuable as a note mortgage. Okay? How it's written and the terms. The terms, the strength of the borrower, the collateral. The collateral is simply means what we're looking at, that house. You know, does it look like it's, you know, the Addams family house? It looks like it's going to fall over next week? Maybe. Okay? Then we got a problem. You know? Is it one of these real nice solid houses in one of these subdivisions that has a good strong value and a good strong, you know, history? Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
then why would they have sold it?
At a discount? Because they're selling, some people will sell them in pools. There's several different reasons why people will sell them. Okay. Let's say, gosh, there are some people who are out there who made these deals, who own these notes and have had them for 10, 12 years, you know. Now they want to get their money out of it. They'll sell them at a discount because they've returned a lot of interest already of their money. So they can afford to sell it at a discount and still get their money back out. Okay? Because the vast majority of the payment at the beginning of the loan is interest. So they can sell them after 10 years or so. They still owe a tremendous amount of that principal interest, or the principal amount, the original principal balance. Okay? There are other places where a corporation or a partnership is only in place for 5 years, or 6 years, or 7 years, whatever the agreement is. Okay? They reach the end of that 7-year period, they have to liquidate whatever they've got. Sometimes they have to liquidate it at a discount to move it fast. Okay? There are people out here like us who look for these deals. We try to buy them at as much of a discount as possible, and we also keep in mind the value of the collateral. We also look at the pay history. Okay? What's the propensity of that borrower to continue to pay like they have? Yes, sir.
Mick, so who's providing all this information? Is the person selling the note going to give you, like, the payment history, photos of the home and all that?
Absolutely.
They will?
To an extent. Okay? Yes, there's certain documentation that if you request it from the seller,
Yeah.
okay, like the original note and the original mortgage, those are documents that you're going to want. Okay? You want to review them. Make sure that they have the originals in their possession. Okay? You make sure that they've got the originals in their possession. Note, mortgage, there's what they call a launch. Okay? You know how everybody signs the back of a check to endorse it? Okay? It's the same thing with a note. If you're going to transfer it, you're going to have to endorse that note on the back saying, pay to the order of Janet. Because I'm selling it to Janet. All right? Pay to the order of without recourse. Yes? Courtney.
So, is there a particular way you can track down these partnerships and dissolving?
Good question. No, I've never tried. I mean, I'm sure there are smart people out there who could probably run circles around us and figure out who's got these. But I mean, you know, if you want to look for hedge funds or partnerships or anything like that. Yeah, George.
Is it negotiable? Like what you purchased it for?
Typically, what we found is the seller has their price set, and we say yes or no. And if we buy it, we buy it. If we don't, we don't. If it makes sense. Some of the people that we do know, we can put offers in, but the industry standard really to say is they'll offer the note out at a certain price, and if it makes sense, you can buy it. And if it doesn't make sense, you just tell them no. Because there's probably a lot more out there. Okay, good question. You could negotiate. I mean, I'm sure everything's negotiable, you know, but it depends on who owns it and what their policy is, really. I mean, so.
So what
Mhm.
we're really saying is that we are paying the full amount of what the original, or not full amount,
Right.
what it has come down to.
Mhm.
We're paying what they pay for the house, for instance.
No, not always.
That, or, well, I know, but I mean, after a certain point, whatever the amount is at that point, like, well, let's say,
No, we won't buy it at unpaid balance. What they owe,
yeah.
No.
What it,
we buy less. We pay below unpaid balance.
but you do pay a chunk of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
for each note,
That's true.
okay.
That's true,
I
yeah.
thought that, but I wanted to be sure,
Yeah,
as to, you know, you've gotta have a lot of money to buy these notes.
not necessarily. And this is what we're going to cover here in a minute or two.
Ah.
Okay, it's good concern. And yeah. Okay, and that's what we call a partial. All right, and I'm going to get into that. And this is kind of blow your mind a little bit, I think. Okay, but if we could buy that discounted note at 85, get a 7.5% yield, we could sell it at 90, give somebody a 7% yield, and make $5 grand. Okay, these things close in a matter of weeks. These do not take a real estate attorney to close this. They don't do huge title searches. They don't have all these fees and all that stuff. I mean, we close notes for $500. Simple, easy, fast, okay? Now, back to the question about the documentation and what you request, okay? You can get a pay history from them, from the seller. You can get the original note and mortgage, copies of them, okay? You won't get possession of them until you pay for it, and they send it to you overnight, okay? Or UPS or whatever it is. But you'll get that document package once you've paid for it. But if you request all the pertinent documents like the allonge, which is the endorsement chain, okay? Deeds, if you're going to get a chain of deeds, you've got that. Mortgages and assignments of mortgage, okay? See, there's a lot of documents that are pertinent. You can get copies of them. And what we do, and it's kind of funny, we'll sit there and draw it out on a piece of paper and run down the chain of assignments, the chain of ownership, making sure that there's not a break there. Because if there's a break there, you don't want that loan.
What would the break indicate?
The break indicates that the title didn't transfer from one person to the next properly.
And on the notes that y'all have purchased, if you just had to estimate the average number of owners of the notes, like how many times has it exchanged hands out of curiosity?
I'd say average probably 3 or 4. It's not a huge amount generally. It's usually about 3 or 4, and you know you can usually put them together fairly easily. You know, it just takes a little bit of quiet and a little bit of concentration.
First question now, if you find some non-conforming notes,
Yeah.
really, really bad,
Mm-hmm.
buy a group of those,
Yeah.
are you able to, once you have possession of the note, to redo the note?
Yes.
So you're
Absolutely.
able to, you could turn around, get them straight again?
Yep.
Get you a big chunk?
Yep.
And,
Yep.
Okay.
And that's good thought. Okay. So what else can you do with the payment stream? Okay. Now what we did, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Okay. There's so many things you can do with notes. It's ridiculous. Okay. There's 3 different types of notes that you're going to look at. Typically 3. Okay. Performing, which makes sense. You know, it's everybody's. The borrower's paying on time. It's being done the way it was agreed to. A performing note is the most valuable. Okay? Sub-performing. Sub-performing means that it has not gone into default quite yet. Okay? They might be what we call a rolling 60. It means they're always continuously 60 days behind, but they keep making payments. Maybe they get 90 days down, then they make 2 payments. Okay? It happens all the time. All right? And this is what we classify as a sub-performing note. Okay? It's riskier, but of course you're going to buy it at a bigger discount. Right? Non-performing note is pretty much self-explanatory. That's when they said, adios, we're not going to pay you anymore. Sometimes they're in the house, sometimes they're not. Okay? This is when you take a look at it and you send somebody out by the house to take pictures and see if there's somebody there, if there isn't. Okay? It makes a big difference. But, again, that is something that you're going to pay a bigger discount for. You're going to get a bigger discount on it. And that's going to open up all kinds of different opportunities. Everybody here is familiar with rehabbing a house? How about rehabbing a loan? Somebody's in the house, you know, they've gone through a rough, difficult time. They say, I can't possibly get caught up, so to heck with it, I'm not going to pay. So what do? We call the servicer and have them go out and contact the borrower and say, listen, do you want to stay in the house or not? And when they say yes, that's like heaven. I love it. Okay? I want to keep people in houses. I don't want to take properties. We dislike that tremendously. Okay? We're not here to take the properties. So if the people in the house want to stay, we will work with them and find out what does work for them. How much can you comfortably afford? And then we can adjust that loan to what works for them. If we have to stretch out the months even further to make it a lower payment, we'll do that. If we have to forgive some of that money to make that balance lower, to make the payment lower, so that they can afford to stay, we'll do that too. You can rehab a note just like you rehab a home. Okay? And again, as you bought that note, you've stepped into the shoes of the lender. You have all the rights and responsibilities of that lender. You cannot change the terms of that note or loan unilaterally without the consent of the borrower. But when the borrower and the lender agree, bang, it's magic. People will stay in their houses and they'll continue to pay. Okay? So let's say just for an example, we take a property, very difficult time, somebody hasn't made payments. All right? We rehab that note. We bought the note at a discount, right? We rehabbed the note, forgave a little bit of the principal, now they're paying again. 12 months later, what do we have left? We have a performing note 12 months later. Now we can sell that for a much smaller discount. So the difference between what we bought it and what we can sell it for is all profit. And it's a win-win-win. The borrower gets to stay in their home. The lender has a good solid deal. And we've made some pretty good money rehabbing that, putting A, B, and C together where everybody's happy. Nobody loses.
Do you have instances where the people were not financially able to keep the house up, to maintain it, to fix things that needed to be fixed? How does that factor in?
Well, when you go past, okay, the question was, do we have situations where people can't maintain the properties, where they don't have the money to maintain the properties? Okay?
And they're behind on the notes.
Yeah, and then they get behind on the notes. Yeah, unfortunately that's part of it. Okay? But we try to work with the borrowers to keep their best interests at heart. We really do. There are people who, there are people in this world who wouldn't live in my house because it's not up to their standards. There are other people who, who could, live in a 65 Chevy. It doesn't matter. Some people just have really good, solid ties to a house where it's just emotional. Okay, as long as they stay in there and pay, that's fine with me. But if the property becomes in disrepair, it's part of the note and mortgage agreeing that you will keep, the borrower will keep it in good repair. Okay? If you want to push it as a lender, you can require them to make repairs. okay, just to stay within the loan. But I don't think I've ever heard of a lender pushing it that far where you really, you know, have to actually go out there and have somebody hammer a nail. You know, again, it's send somebody by there once a year to take a look at the property. And if it's really starting to fall down, then you've got a concern. Okay, yeah.
Could you not purchase like someone who's in pre-foreclosure that owes $100,000 on a $300,000 and they're about to get foreclosed on, but you're gonna pay off that mortgage and then help them by refinancing that?
You could if the note is for sale. Because again, we're not buying the property, we're buying the note, okay? And yes, if the lender says, yeah, I'll sell you the note for $100,000.
I know that we talk to people that are in pre-foreclosure and we buy their house.
Yep.
And so they're willing to do that.
Right.
The bank, because they don't want to foreclose.
No.
So you could buy it and then just work out something with them and just refinance them yourself.
As long as the note's for sale, yes. Yes. And the thing is even if you're in that position and you see that, you know, any one of you here in this room can broker a note. You don't have to have the finances to do it. If you find a note out there and somebody's in hard times and the lender is willing to sell that note, okay, you can call Janet and myself. We will find somebody who will buy that note and pay you a broker fee. Okay? We'll go out there and we'll get a price for that note. We have buyers all over the country. Somebody will come back and say, we can pay $74,000 for that note. Okay? If the lender's willing to sell that note for $74,000, you just got a deal and just save somebody. Yeah. But it's a little bit more complicated than just buying the property. But yeah, we can broker those things.
In that situation, how do you find out the notes for sale? You have to contact the lender and who?
That's the hard part. The borrower is the one who would have to contact the lender because we don't have the right to do so.
Yeah.
Okay? We need authorization to release information, and typically the bank is going to stall and balk at it and say, no, I'm not going to give you that information. 99 times out of 100, those notes are not for sale. Okay? But that's the tough part. If you can find the note for sale, that's great. 99% of the time, you won't find it. Okay? We buy them out on the secondary market. Okay? So, as you were saying before, Pat, do you need a lot of money to buy a note? No, you don't. Okay? How about selling, we're buying that payment stream, right? Well, what if we find somebody who's got a lot of dry cash sitting in their IRA, or even a little bit of dry cash, right? Sitting in an IRA. You buy 360 payments, all right? How about if you sold the first 300 to somebody else for the same amount that you paid for? Does that make sense? All right? You paid $85,000 for 360 payments. You sell 300 payments for that same 85 grand that you paid for it. So you got no money out of pocket anymore. Okay? You sold them 300 payments. What's going to happen to the other 60 payments at the end? When that 300 payments is paid off, the 60 returns to me. Or you. Depending on if you did the deal. Okay? What's your return on that? It's infinite because you've got no investment. You hold the last 60 payments for free. That's how you can create money out of nothing.
But
And if
it
it
takes
pays,
a long time to get there.
maybe. What if they pay early? The unpaid balance, okay? So if they paid right around this point right here, the difference between the blue and the gray is your discount, what you earned. So at the very beginning of the note here, if they pay off right now, you don't make much. But the longer it goes, the more money you're going to make. Okay, that's what that little graph is for. Okay, so that's another thing that we can do with it. You can sell a partial, which means you sell a portion of the note, the payment stream, and hold the back if you want to. Okay, and that's what Janet and I try to do, because Hi, yes.
Initially though, you're still paying $85,000 for the note, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, but you
Yeah, in
sell
the beginning, so you need $85,000.
yeah. Well, you can do a double close. If the investor comes in with the 85,000, you give it to the attorney, okay? And the paperwork will be a double close, basically. At the end of that transaction, that note, those 300 payments, those beginning, the first 300 payments, will be in the name of the person who brought the 85,000. And at the very end of that loan, the 60 payments will revert back to me. Okay? So it's just, yeah. As soon as I receive 85,000 from the investor, okay, that goes to an attorney. I'm not going to take possession of it. Okay? But that's the money that's paying for this note. So that investor is buying the first 300 payments. That's what he wants. That's what he's going to get. Okay? The remaining 60 is going to be coming to me when that's paid off.
What happens if they pay that one off early?
Oh, that's so sweet. Okay? The investor who owns the 300 gets paid his unpaid balance, and we get the difference. Because there's going to be two separate amortization schedules that are running side by side. And I don't mean to confuse people because it can be confusing. But there are two separate amortization schedules that are running side by side. Okay? His unpaid balance and my unpaid balance. So when that pays off early, he gets his complete unpaid balance, what he's owed as the investor, and I make the difference.
Oh, so that grass makes a little more sense. So in the very beginning, you're the grace. You're not really getting anything for the first,
Yes.
whatever. But then after the amortization, it's starting to build up over time.
Exactly.
So it's not like you have to wait 30 months or 300 months to get yours. You're getting it kind of.
I could if they pay off early.
Yeah.
I will wait 300 months to get my free 60. It doesn't cost me anything.
Yeah. But you get the full at the 60.
Yeah, the 60?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I get one payment every month for 60 months.
Yeah.
If it continues to pay as agreed. Okay? So that was only one way to make money with note investing. Okay, we've discussed 2 or 3 actually. Like the rehabbing of the note, things like that. Now there are other people who use this type of thing, the non-performing notes, to kind of backdoor their way into buying and owning the property at a significant discount. Banks and institutions are selling these notes because they don't want to go through the hassle and the expense and the time-consuming process of foreclosing on a property. Plus it keeps them out of the newspaper. You ask a bank or an asset management company that handles these non-performing notes, what's the worst thing that can happen? They can be in the news for kicking out a single mom with 4 kids in December. That's the worst thing that can happen for PR. They want to stay out of the newspapers. So what do they want to do? They want to sell the notes before they go. Okay? This is why you've seen a huge drop in HUD, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac foreclosures. Does anybody else see this? That there's very few foreclosed properties on the market anymore? HUD, Fannie and Freddie started a couple of years ago selling their notes, these big pools of notes and properties, before they foreclosed on them. They didn't want to deal with it. So they sold them to BSI. They've sold these big pools of non-performing notes to hedge funds and let them work it out. Okay? So you're not seeing a lot of them anymore. All right? So there are other ways that you can work with notes. You can buy and hold for yourself if you want to in an IRA and make it, completely tax-free if you wish. Okay? We recommend a Roth IRA, self-directed. You can own it. The only thing that I want to tell you is that owning a note, you need to have either an LLC or some type of entity. You can't own it as a person. You can't own it individually. Okay? We won't, I don't know if there's anybody who will sell them to you like that, but we won't. Okay? It needs to be an LLC or maybe an IRA account, an entity. Okay? You can buy and sell. You can broker, like we've just been talking about. You can rehab a sub or non-performing loan. You can also do consultation. If you know how to draw these things up that make them the most valuable at sale, anybody who wants to do this type of deal and owner finance a property to somebody, you really need to have your wits about you and draw it up properly. Okay, especially when you're working with owner occupants. Okay, Dodd-Frank, those words I hate to say, but Dodd-Frank came along and really messed things up. They didn't mean to, but that's how that worked out. Okay, you can buy non-performing loans to acquire the property at low cost. Okay, you can do that too. So how do you manage a note? We talked about that a little bit ago. A loan servicer. They do all the work, they send all the paperwork, they keep it all in compliance. They keep the government off your case. All right? At the end of the year, they'll send you a nice little 1099 INT, which tells you how much interest you earned that year. They do all of it. Okay? Doesn't get any better than that. So, using performing notes to build passive income, you want to do it in an entity or an LLC, tax-free. The great part about it is it's predictable, monthly income. All right? It's backed by hard assets, properties, okay? And there's plenty of inventory out there. It's not like the REO business where there's not a lot of properties available anymore, okay? So you can build wealth the easy way and let it come into your email box, all right? And the great thing is you can do this anywhere you want, okay? If it's coming into your email, most people have email on their phones. So you can see that the deposit came in and hey, it's time to order another margarita, okay? So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, I don't know if we have time for, maybe one or two questions. Yeah, Pat?
What happens in the course of it all if the person wants to sell their house?
Huh?
That's a great thing, right?
Oh, that's sweet. Oh yeah, it's like any other transaction, all right? If a person wants to sell their house, they sell it. Part of that transaction, the attorney's going to call or ask the servicer for the payoff amount. The servicer's going to send them a payoff quote, and that's all going to go into the closing. And once the check for that property gets to the attorney to buy it for the new buyer, those funds are going to be dispersed to take care of all the loans that are out on that. And yours is always going to be the first. It's going to be the first. We don't buy seconds. You can, and that's a whole nother hour. So everybody set your clock back for another hour. Okay? Second position notes, you can buy those too. Okay? That's kind of a different animal. It's got a lot of different quirks to it, and it takes a completely different mindset to mess with those. Okay? Because you have to take into account the first position note. Alright? So that's a good question, but you get paid off. If somebody sells the house, bam, you get paid off, go find another one. Yes?
So I think somebody asked this earlier, but I didn't quite understand your answer. So where do you get the notes from?
We buy them from contacts that we've made all across the country.
So you have to find people that are, how do you find the people to buy a note? Like,
to buy a note?
If I wanted to invest in a note,
yep.
Who do I contact to see
Janet
if they have something?
We'll broker it too. Yeah, we'll broker it. That's no problem. We can identify the note for you. We'll look at all the paperwork, all the documentation, sit down and show you everything in that file. And say, if you pay this much for it, okay, this is going to be your return. This is the pay history. This is how long they've been paying. We'll go through everything with you, okay? And if you like it, you can buy it. If not, you don't have to buy it.
Okay, so y'all are actually the source.
We can be.
Getting the notes.
Around here, yeah, if you don't have the expertise to do it, I highly suggest that you don't learn by error. Okay? Because it's very easy. You could lose a property by one mistake. Okay? And yeah, I've seen it happen. So, and everybody else, okay, if you want to contact us, there's our contact information right there. My name is Mick. My wife is Janet. Just contact us if you want to. We run a meetup like on Thursday at noon over at our office over off Ashley Fossway Road. Okay, we dive into, as Tom can tell you, we dive into notes and we cover all kinds of different subjects. When it comes to this type of thing, passive note investing, we do this all the time. So if you have any questions, please give us a call and we'll hang out here for a few minutes. Okay?
Is that your telephone number?
Which one? 573-1902? Yep, that's our phone number. That's my extension's 102, and Janet's is 101. So,
Well, I just indicate the 866.
oh, that's myself. Okay, yeah. 866-573-1902.
Is that a commercial?
No,
It's, the
no, it's a